Good.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of By the Time We Get to Phoenix, Our View from the Back Seat. And I have another brother coming on with me this evening, and I want to introduce brother number 2, because Mom had 5. She had 4 in basically 4 years, but this is Jeff. Jeff, how you doing this evening?
Brian, actually, I'm your brother number 1.
That's right.
I'm son number 2, brother number 1. So
exactly.
I like to think of it that way anyway.
Yeah. How you doing this evening?
Oh, pretty good. I'm 64 years old and still alive. I can't complain.
That's right. What we're talking about, everyone, is we're kind of reminiscing on the 50th anniversary of our family's epic trip in 1973, of course, from Ohio to Phoenix, Arizona. And really, Phoenix seemed to be at the focal point of my dad's existence and his focus for so long. We're not really sure why. The brothers and I have talked about it, but we ended up going there for vacations, and then we ended up moving down there. So this episode will kind of deal with the trips we've taken and some of the things we did on our quest to find happiness, really. And, when you think of the phoenix rising out of the ashes, that's kind of a symbolic thing, really, that, you become stronger and you learn from your mistakes. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure we ever did, but I have a story I want to talk about first, Jeff. I remember, and I can't remember if it's when we were driving to Phoenix to live or whether it was one of our vacations there. But, our dad would drive for hours. I've never really been around anybody who could drive like he could. And he had this huge car. He had him in the front seat, Mom on the passenger, which she was the shotgun. And I almost mean that literally. And then she had the 5 of us in the back seat. Luckily, Kyle didn't take up much room. He was only 2 years old. When we got tired of him, we kind of threw him in the up in that big, huge window.
I'm sure we didn't have seat belts either.
We did not have seat belts. Dad had no air conditioning. Dad, please roll the window down. He would not allow radio or really any talking.
No.
And but I remember after hours and hours of driving, Dad decided to stop. I forget where we were at. We were in mountainous country. So he stopped. I'm not kidding, folks. He didn't go to a hotel or even a roadside rest. He decided to stop for a couple hours on the side of a road. We couldn't see. It was pitch black. There was no lights. And all of a sudden, after a couple hours, Dad felt the car start to move. Do you remember that, Jeff?
Sure do. The whole instance of being in a roadside rest with Mom and Dad and 5 kids, young kids, in relative terms. You and I were probably teenagers by then, of course, but young kids. You couldn't crack the window because, Mom would think someone would try to use that and break down the windows and get in.
Yep.
Dad had shut the car off.
Yep.
It's night. It's still kind of warm in a very closed car. If you've ever sat in a car like that for so long, your body heat and your breathing, the heat goes up in that car. So all of a sudden, Dad is leaning back in his seat, probably laying on one of us as we're in the back seat.
Yep.
The car starts to move, and it scared us. He scared us.
We all woke
by
up.
his reaction.
We all woke up.
Yeah, we all woke up, and Dad puts his foot on the brake, and it's like we're all woke up. We may as well go. And it all seems like a dream sometimes when you talk about these things. But yeah, we were heading backwards.
Well, once we got going and Dad turned the car lights on, we were on the side of a mountain by a cliff. I don't know how, I couldn't say mountain, but the side of a cliff. We would have went down 20, 30 feet. Now, how they thought that was safe, and, we were on a shoestring budget for sure. And I don't even know how we would go hours without wanting something to drink. You know, it was the 1970s, 73. They didn't have, you know, canisters like they do now that would keep everything cold.
Well, so, you know, mom had several great lines at that time. You know, if you cry about it and say you wanted something, she said, "I'll give you something to cry about."
Yeah, that was her line.
So then you'd shut up if you had any sense. You wouldn't, of course. You were the one that would just keep torturing her. The rest of us you would sit behind mom.
Yeah, I did.
When she turned around in her seat with her shoe in her hand, you would kind of cringe in the corner by the door, and she couldn't quite reach over her left shoulder, and she had a door on her right side, so you were protected. And a lot of time, mom would swing, being mad at us, and just hit whoever was close.
Yeah, did that all the time. I remember I first started out sitting next behind Dad, and apparently I was kicking his seat. And I remember him saying, "You got to get away. Just sit over there by Mom." So I never sat behind Dad again. You guys did.
I did. Well, it was always nice. We were the two oldest, so we got the corners.
We got the window seats.
Randy got the middle, and then Kyle would jump back in the back or wherever he would end up. Okay. He kind of had free reign. Again, no seatbelt. I don't think Mom and Daddy wore a seatbelt. I can't believe that they would have.
No, absolutely did not have a seatbelt on.
So we're rolling down the road. Just fate was on our side, because it wouldn't have taken much for us to have an accident and throw us all out of the car. But that was 1973. That was driving long distances. And you know, when we talk about Phoenix, Brian, in 1973, 50 years ago, we've been in a small town, Upper Sandusky, most of our life. Occasionally we went to Marion. Dad would move to Marion to be closer to work. But 1973, the city of Phoenix starts to become a topic of discussion.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sure Dallas glamorized it in his discussions with Dad. Dad and Dallas seemed to be pretty close. And it was such a great place to be. I think our first trip was a vacation, right? It wasn't full out moving.
Nope.
You know, we'd go out for a couple weeks and enjoy it. And once Dad got the fever, there was no turning back in his mind.
That's right. It was a nice 2-week vacation, but getting there was 3 days. Coming home was 3.
Right.
So there was almost a week out. So we had a week out there. And when we got there, do you remember that feeling of just, we're in paradise, the heat? Oh, my God. I remember us just jumping out and kind of worshiping the sun god almost. We just could not believe how intense the heat was. It was a dry heat, so it was very different. But Phoenix,
Mom and Dad would warn us about it, say it's going to be real hot. And Dallas made it glamorized that we'll be in air conditioning in the house, and it's just so beautiful out here, and you won't believe it. It's cool in the evening. And
well, he was right, absolutely right.
He was right. And for me, it was kind of exciting. The thought of driving out there, being in a new place. You know, when you're a kid from Upper Sandusky and you haven't been anywhere really, going to a big city was, I thought, in my mind, a couple weeks out there and get to play with Dallas and meet Linda again, and Bean was out there, their son. It just seemed like a fun trip.
It was just
that was the 2 weeks.
It was destiny to be there, and some of the times we had. But back then, of course, there was no Major League Baseball football team. Dallas basically had just a simple house with 4 or 5 rooms, but had air conditioning, which we couldn't believe. We didn't know what air conditioning was. Had a nice backyard that we went back down there. I want to talk about another episode, and it's not a pleasant one for me. I know you remember it. I was 15, you were 13, Rick and Randy were 11, Kyle was 2. We're in Oklahoma. I don't know which time we went, because we went to Phoenix so many times back and forth that all of us literally lost track of which trip was where. But they all come together, right?
Right.
So Dad's driving along, and he was a marathon driver. He would just go for hours and hours. He had to get to his destination. And by the way, he didn't even look out. We'd see the Golden Gate, not the Golden Gate, but the Golden St. Louis
the Gateway Arch.
The arches. Dad didn't care about that at all.
No.
He was
Eyes on the road.
Focused on his destination. Dad, let's stop. We got to keep going forward. Anyway, we get to Oklahoma, and this is probably not our first trip. This is like the second or third. And we break down in the middle of the night, around midnight. We didn't know. We knew we were in Oklahoma. We didn't know where we were, and we break down. Car would not go. We don't know exactly. It was the bearings, I think, wasn't it? Something
like that. It was
the
wheel bearings. Yes.
Something serious that actually happened in my car a couple years ago, and it was an expensive thing to fix. So Dad gets out of the car. Of course, we're going to all get out. You know, Mom's saying, "Get back in the car." We felt like we were in a wooded area, and Dad's out on the side of the road, and he's doing the breakdown sign. I didn't know what in the world he was doing. I couldn't figure it out.
Grabbing both ends of an imaginary stick and snapping it.
And
that was Dad.
Broke down, and people kept going by. There wasn't a whole lot of people because it was midnight.
No, but we're on the side of the road, and all that's between us and that right lane was a layer of paint, and it would just boom when the trucks would go by.
Oh, it's awful.
And I'm thinking, wow, can we get out or nope? Stay in the car. And somebody finally pulled over and said, "What do you need?"
Yeah, two guys. Remember, it was two guys in the car.
Well, you would be more involved in that than me because, as it turns out, Dad and Mom sent you to go with these guys instead of Mom staying with us and perhaps Dad going with these guys.
Yeah, that's the amazing part, and I'm sure people that listen to this thinking, did your mom and dad lose their mind? Did they lose their marbles? We don't know. I obviously did not want to go, and I remember being in the car because we were told to stay in the car, which is probably a good thing because big semis going by. Mom, I don't want to go. I don't know these guys. You're going, Dad. You're going. He's going. I thought, oh, all right. I just got in the car, sat in the back. They were in the front. And when I see a mobster movie now with the guy in the back seat, I'm thinking, boy, that brings back memories.
Well, yeah, they usually don't get out.
You usually don't get out. It's your last trip, and they put you in cement and throw you over the side of a bridge.
Well, when Mom and Dad got back in the car, or when Dad got back in the car and said Brian's going with them, or I have even asked, "Where's Brian?" And he went with them, and I'm thinking, what? Why would he go? Why wouldn't you go, Dad? I don't know if I said it or just thought it, but I do remember Mom giving Dad crap in the car about where is he? When's he coming back? Because you were gone a few hours.
Yeah, we had to go several miles up the road. We were in the middle of the boondocks, and I remember passing a sign that said, Oklahoma State Prison, next turn. So that's how close we were. We could probably find it on a map.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what these guys were going to do. I mean, I was a tall guy, but I was skinny as could be. I didn't know anything about anything. But I remember I think it was, that said later that Dad actually said after I'd been gone for like an hour, maybe I should have been the one that went and had Brian stay here. And
correct.
When I heard that years later, I thought, what in the world? I really thought, do they not even care about me? Do they want me to die?
Well, I don't know.
Because, I was what was called the troublemaker at the time. I didn't get along with any of the brothers. Mom and I clashed. I didn't really get along too well with Dad. So I was kind of like, you talk about the black sheep of the family. That was me. Different time. Everything was different. But I can't tell you the relief when I got back. I didn't think I was going to make it. Well, he's back, and I think even Dad, seemed happy.
Yeah, I think everybody had a sigh of relief. All of us, everybody in that car, that you finally made it back, and they brought us back. And then, of course, we ended up was spending 3 or 4 days with this family while the car was getting fixed.
That's another amazing story, and I know people listen to this say, "You guys are really spinning some yarns." No, we're not.
No, we're not.
We found a family, a young family, too. This was just as I remember him, he was a young guy with a young wife.
Yeah.
And he, out of the goodness of his heart, or maybe it was angels, we don't know, who let us stay at their house. They didn't know us from Adam. And we stayed there, 3 days while they fixed the car?
At least 3 days.
Yeah, but they just let us take over the house. I mean, we just ate basic stuff on the floor, basically. That was in Oklahoma. I never have good memories of Oklahoma. I'll just tell you that. Then we were back on the road again, and the amazing thing about Dad, I wish I had this mind control, he absolutely did not let that bother him at all.
No.
He just moved forward.
I think that is how Dad was his whole life. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but that was the Dad we came to know and love throughout our whole life and all his whole life. That not much fazed him. Dad would just keep on going no matter what happened. Never saw too much weakness out of Dad.
Not in that regard.
No.
He absolutely was raised in an era where anything like that was a weakness. And we never saw him cry, never really saw him get upset. Now, I can say honestly that he never, ever hit me, ever. Never hit me. I don't hardly remember him raising his voice.
Yeah, Dad never whipped me, but he put Mom up to it.
Yeah, she was the enforcer. Mom hit me probably every day. I remember many times getting hit in Phoenix. One time she threw a cover of a typewriter or something at me, hit me in the head. Well, she would chase me out the door because of something I did to you probably. And I'd be gone for hours with no water.
Yeah, well, so again, some of that you brought on yourself. We're not in the car now. We are actually in Phoenix.
In the backyard.
But by the time we get to Phoenix, we've all got cabin fever probably. And glad to get out of the car and stretch our legs. And once we got to Phoenix, I just cannot imagine the grief and the crap that Dallas and Linda went through putting up with us, Mom and Dad, and 5 kids.
Yeah, 5. We were in our prime as far as energy. Dallas really pushed for Dad to be out there. He must have been lonely. And it's easy to describe Dallas and Linda. Dallas was a good-looking guy, heavy set. Randy looks a lot like Dallas. He reminds me of him. They have a lot of the same trait. Just an easygoing guy, a nice shock of hair, athletic. Never really saw Dallas upset. Tremendous sense of humor. But he weighed, 250 pounds. He was 6'2", 6'3", 250 pound, big guy. Linda was like a doll. She had always had her hair perfectly done, the nails. She was, what would you say, Jeff? 5'3", 100 pounds, 100 pounds.
Yeah, that range.
Just one of those women who, you could just tell never got her hands dirty. She was very feminine, which we loved. We loved that about her. Real soft voice, almost like a southern gal who was just nice to be around. But I do remember when we got there, one time Mom and Dad went out with Dallas and Linda. I think Mom and Dad, were spending their life savings. They weren't going to put anything away for our college fund. We'll put it that way. Because they had sold their house and were in 8th Street in Upper Sandusky and were out there. They were out one time, gone the entire day. And I remember them come home. And Dallas said to Linda, I'm kind of hungry. Linda said, oh, no problem. I've got this gigantic cookie jar. I've got it filled with 200 cookies. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was right as you walked in their kitchen on the right side by the refrigerator.
Exactly. Oh,
cookie jar.
No problem. Got this gigantic. It was the biggest cookie jar I'd ever seen.
Well, we found it pretty quick.
We found it. We were like hyenas. Once they left, we went through the entire house.
Well, I remember thinking, well, I'm only going to take a couple. And then I'd eat them, and I'd come back in. I'm only going to take a couple. And pretty soon, you're grabbing for the bottom of the jar. It was a huge jar.
Linda reached in. Oh, no problem. I got some cookies. Oh, they're gone. And I remember how flabbergasted she was. And we just kind of sat there with silly, goofy looks on our face. But, they left us with nothing to eat. I don't know what they were expecting us to do in 100-degree heat.
Well, I always felt, and that carries over to my adult life because I feel guilty about stuff like that. And I don't know if I should be because I was just being a kid, like you say. But, we had to deal with a lot of discipline issues with Mom. Mom had no tolerance for tomfoolery, messing around, and typically you were the one that got blamed for it.
Yeah, a lot of it. I was like the ringleader, but we were just being kids, like you said. But what did she expect us to do? But Mom really had a high standard for us, and I'm sure later it's there for us that we use it now with ourselves, with our kids and our grandkids. But they just expected that when they got back that we were going to be there sitting on the couch watching TV. This is 73, 74. It was a different time. I'm sure some good things came out of it. I don't remember us getting too much trouble about that. But,
No,
they were gone for a while. We had to eat something.
Well, I want to go back and talk about the whole Phoenix experience and the drives because, like you said, we went so many times. Vacation, moving there. I mean, I moved there in my 9th grade year and 10th grade year, and we had, man, it seems like I took 7 or 8 trips to Phoenix. And it's not just a trip there. In some cases, it was a trip back. It lost its fun. It lost its glamour after a while. And it's no fun sitting in the car and doing all that. And you had to think of ways to keep your mind occupied.
Yep, you did. We didn't have the video games and the headphone. We had nothing. We had the window that we looked out of. But do you remember how we would feel? Because Dad always took the northern route every single time with us, driving through Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get through Texas, which took hours, and then we had to go through New Mexico, which there was just no traffic back then. Again, it's 1973, 74. There just wasn't the landmarks and everything that you would see now on the side of the highway. It was just desolate. And I remember saying, oh, man, alive. Look at that horizon. There's nothing there. And then once you get through New Mexico, then you're in northern Arizona. You have to go straight down, and we still had 3 hours to go.
Correct. We have it all. We had the trip memorized.
We had it memorized.
The routes, the landmarks, whatever landmarks there were. But one thing it did for me, I've always been a kid I was always a kid that had numbers on my mind, and the thought of adding and subtracting and seeing numbers and doing all sorts of things with numbers. I used that trip when I had nothing else to do but look out the window. I was finding ways to keep my mind occupied. I would look for a license plate that had the highest set of numbers.
Yeah, we did that.
Just finding things like the next 10 cars. What was the ratio of black cars to red cars? And just little things to keep my mind occupied because it's almost 2,000 miles. You figure Dad goes an average of 50 to 60 miles an hour. Let's say 50. It's 40 hours in a car.
Yep, that's one way, by the way, right?
Yeah, one way. So, and there's no radio, like you said. If I brought a book, I could go through it real quick, and then you'd run out of things to do. So numbers kept me busy in my head, or arguing with you because you'd get tired and want to stretch your legs, and you turn sideways in your seat on the other door and drag them across our laps, which was instant anger, yelling, and mom saying, "You kids better be quiet."
Yeah.
And that usually didn't work.
I remember you falling asleep and me having my socks right in your face. I remember that.
Those funny jokes of yours that were funny to you, but no one else.
Well, our saving grace was we were in a gigantic car because the cars were huge back then.
It wasn't that gigantic.
They're classic now, but they're so much better than how they are now. And there wasn't anything in between, like, armrests. We could just...
I give you this, Brian. It had to be tough being as tall as you were.
Right.
Trying to sit in the back seat when Mom, I'm sure, had her seat all the way back.
She did.
And Dad was comfortable. So, we're left with whatever we got.
I don't remember having anything to drink. I think Mom had a cooler, and she would put Kool-Aid in it. We literally drank a lot of Kool-Aid because that was the big thing back in the 70s, the Kool-Aid.
those trips were not first class. They were sleeping in the car on roadside rest, stopping. If we did stop for food, it was a loaf of bread and some lunch meat.
Yep.
And Kool-Aid probably, but certainly nothing fantastic. There were no Logan Steakhouses, Steve's Dakota Steakhouses. There was no Cracker Barrel, none of that. This was on a strict shoestring budget. And if you didn't like it, I'll give you something to cry about.
I don't remember staying in a hotel, going or coming back to Ohio ever. Never. I do want to get your take on what Kyle and I talked about in podcast 1. And again, our show is called By the Time We Get to Phoenix, Our View from the Back Seat, where we were traveling, and I think we were moving. That's when we were moving to Phoenix, and Dad got a trailer, and he had a choice between getting a closed trailer from U-Haul or getting one that was open. He, of course, made the wrong choice, probably based on he could save $3.
Right.
Everything is in the back, and we're about 20, 30 minutes outside of our home, just going through Marion, as I remember. I think I know where that street is. It was a back country road. Dad didn't want to take the highways for some reason, and things started to blow out. And you talk about a literal paper trail. We were getting that. So
there were glass lids. I'm sure anything that was loose, and for the most part, everything seemed loose. Dad had packed, or Mom had, one of them had packed stuff in garbage bags.
Right.
And of course, those seemed to be on top, maybe to load everything down, to keep it weighed down. People pulling up beside us saying, "Stuff's falling out, you're losing stuff." And
yep.
If I could have, I probably did. I slunk down in my seat and I said, "What are we doing here?" I thought, what a bunch of hillbillies we were.
Yeah, we were. I remember getting out, though, and having to grab a lot of things. Some things we just said, to heck with it, we're going to leave it. And Dad just said, well, let's go. We've got everything. We're losing time. He was really funny about time. But Dad, when he left things behind, him and Mom, it just didn't seem to bother them. You know, the family albums.
I think it bothered Mom. It may have bothered Mom more than Dad.
Later on it did. It did. But they lived for the moment. They left a beautiful family album someplace. Dad's uniforms, for his bowling trophies, his war uniforms, gone. Well, we've got about 8 minutes, everyone. So I want to see if you want to talk about anything else, Jeff.
By the time we got to Phoenix, just to stay in line with our topic,
right?
There was a couple incidents that by the time we got to Phoenix, and we were in Phoenix, a couple incidents. I remember laying out in Dallas, in Linda's, their house backyard, a nice backyard, fenced in.
Yes, it was.
A lot of room, it seemed like. We had stuff to do. We could play sports back there if we wanted to, or catch or whatever. And one day I'm just out there laying in the sun on a nice lawn chair that laid flat. And all of a sudden I feel like I'm being tied to the lawn chair. I'm thinking, what's going on? I open my eyes and it's you.
You were 13.
You tied my shoulders and my waist, my knees and my feet to this lawn chair, and I can't move. And for some ridiculous reason, only you would know about at that time of your life, lifted up the head of the chair. So I'm standing up basically in this chair tied to it, and you drop me straight on my face, stomach, boom. Had nothing to shield me, nothing to cushion me. Couldn't put my hands out, of course.
Nope.
And boy, it about knocked me out.
And there was no grass. You couldn't grow grass in Phoenix at that time. It was
no grass. All it was a dirt yard.
Sun-baked.
I know that Mom, I do know that before I got out, Mom had come out. So I'm sure Rick or Randy went in the house and yelled, you killed me, or you're trying to kill me. By the time I got out, I remember Mom running out the back door, wanting to know what in the blank or whatever you did. And you're running from her.
I did.
You jump the fence.
Yep.
And you take off.
I was gone for 2 hours and 100
at least. At least
no
2
water.
hours.
No water. Luckily, I had shoes on.
Well, there were two trains of thought while you were gone. He'll be back. Dallas and Dad, oh, he'll be back. And finally, after an hour or so, Mom and Dad said, well, maybe he got lost or whatever. So they eventually go out looking for you.
I did. I'd never been there before. I didn't know where I was. I know I was in a rough area with no water and 100-degree heat.
Well,
no money. 15 years old. Why I did that, I don't know. I ponder, psychiatrists will have to answer that question. I don't know why I did that. I probably found a little bit of rope someplace in a garage because I was bored. Because back then, we didn't watch TV. We didn't have video games. We didn't have movies. And it was such basic things. That's when everybody just kind of did their thing outside of the living room. You were not doing things in TVs and with Xbox. And, boredom sets in. Don't know why I did that.
Whatever. Yeah, I paid the price.
For some reason, you being out there enjoying your day and sunbathing, because you were dark anyway. You were always a little bit darker skinned than we were. Getting a nice tan, and I just thought, no, let's have some fun. As I remember it, as I held you up straight up, you slipped out of my hands, and just happened to fall down on your face.
Yeah, that. Yeah, I believe that. You can't convince me to believe that.
But
to sum everything up.
Yeah.
By the time we get to Phoenix, I've talked to all my brothers, all of you guys, about these regular trips, these constant trips, this moving and changing schools and this and all these different challenges that Mom and Dad put in front of us. I have chosen to interpret these as chapters in my life that were an adventure. They were a learning experience. I don't try to stay bitter. I don't think I've ever been bitter about it like some brothers have. I've just said I enjoyed it. Nobody else has had the experiences that we've had.
Nope.
These are unique. These are things that we couldn't script. Mom and Dad had no script in mind when creating these chapters, these episodes. These parts of our life. They just put it in front of us and we improv'd it. And those are the memories we have that nobody else has in my world.
Nope.
These are great memories, and that's how I choose to look at them.
Yeah, we look back at Phoenix now, and there's a lot of happiness there, a lot of fond memories. It didn't seem like it at the time, but, looking back, it seems magical. We were all together as a family.
Yeah.
Pretty soon, a couple years later, I was married and moving on. We were split.
Yeah, that was a true family experience. You got that right.
Mom and Dad didn't plan anything. A lot of times it was, I think next month we're moving to Phoenix.
There we go.
We're off. The symbolic moments of the word Phoenix, I think we have to investigate that. Rising from the ashes, and you end up being a stronger, better, smarter person because of it. It's symbolic. It's in Greek mythology, but for us, it really rang true. So we're running out of time, everyone. We want to stick to our promise of about 35 minutes for each podcast. So we hope you enjoyed it. We have a lot more to talk about, and we hope that you continue to listen. Jeff, I'd love to have you come back, and we can talk about some more. We have so much to talk about, reminiscing, and get the rest of the brothers involved, we hope. And you've been listening to, by the time we get to Phoenix, our view from the back seat. Jeff, I'll give you the last word before we sign out.
I wouldn't change a thing in my life, including these trips. They're great memories. Great
way to end it. Thanks again, everyone, and we will see you down the road for the next journey on By the Time We Get to Phoenix. Our view from the back seat.